community now. Gachagua allies are going to say, or have said indeed, that they're going to oppose that particular bill on the premise of the taxes, just to show the president that indeed they're not happy with the way that their one and only DP Rigathi Gachagua is getting treated in this government. We should be talking about that. Also, on the back end of our conversation this morning, we should be looking into some of the benefits that are bound to accrue from the president's latest visit to the United States of America. What is Kenya bound to benefit from this visit? We postulate those questions this morning with our guests who are going to walk into the studio, and you can be part of the conversation. The hashtag is MoneyDrift, at Lookuptv across all your social media platforms. For now, let's take a tiny breather, come back and jump directly into whatever it is that you're waking up to this morning in your daily list. And welcome back. Let's start with the standard this morning, so we see exactly what it is that they're talking about. And on the top page of that particular newspaper is a story on page 8 and 9. U.S. visit, the joy and comfort of flying a Hustler jet. By the way, the total cost of the flight is around 240 something million. It's around 2.4 million a day. Was it a day or an hour? I think it's an hour. Yes, it's 2.4 million an hour. So over the 5 days that will be there, we have to fork out 241 million. That's almost 500 million. That's almost $500 million. Read that story on page 8 and 9. Yeah, it's a special jet. He didn't go with our jet, the presidential plane. Yeah, that story is on page 8 and 9. A court bans Zuma from next elections. You're going to read that story on page 36. It's a story I really want to avoid, on 10 games that decided EPL title rights. Let me summarize for you this story. They're going to read on page 46. We blame Man United for getting beaten home and away by Man City. Simple as that. And the ones who are celebrating the most. Yeah, simple as that. I mean, 10 games that decided EPL title race, Arsenal and Man City practically won everything in 2024. Everything, practically, other than maybe 1 or 2 games that they drew and lost. Yeah, but now they are our neighbors down there, who are number 8 and number 6 and number 10. Were celebrating the most. They're the ones who got absolutely nothing. Farmers League is not because of Arsenal. Arsenal didn't bottle anything. We didn't bottle anything. How do you expect us to bottle something when we've only lost 1 game in a calendar year? It is Man United who are bottling it. Anyway, story on page 46. Story that we started our show with this morning on Gachagua allies are planning to oppose Ruto tax proposals. You're going to read that story on page 2 at a time when Mount Kenya members of parliament say that the first rebellious act against the president will be to amend the finance bill that the government intends to use to collect taxes that will fund its operations. You're going to read that story on page 2, and they're saying that the tax on bread proposals is a decoy and they'll discard it after hue and cry, but it is aimed at diverting attention. Good story here. You're going to read on pages 4, 5, 6, and 7. Economy looks rosy, except money in Mwananchi pockets. The economy survey 2024 released yesterday shows economy grew by 5.6% in 2023 compared to 4.9% in 2022, with agriculture, forestry, and fishing being the major contributors to the gross domestic product. And you'll read that story again on page 4, 5, 6, and 7. An international story here that we broke yesterday is what is our next for Iranians after Raisi's death. Pakistani described murder puzzle of Americans. You're going to read that story on page 3 as well. All right, let's jump into the next daily this morning, and that has to be the Daily Nation this morning. It's talking about where to get the best paying job, 4.5%. It's talking about the economic survey that essentially came out yesterday. You got to hear on where we are. Accommodation and food service, transport and financial sectors are the top employers in the country. So you now do know, if you want to get paid properly or well, then you got to be in financial services sector, hospitality, that is under food service, transport and financial services sectors. They're the top employers in the country. That's it. Another story, you're going to read that story on page 6, 7 and 8, the summary of the economic survey that came out yesterday. Gachagwa's UDA allies accused of blackmail. You're going to read that story on page 4. Ruto'S U.S. state visit. A beautiful picture right there of the president of the Republic of Kenya, Dr. President William Ruto, getting welcomed in the United States of America. Guy is playing drums and black kids. Yeah, playing drums. It's a beautiful picture. As on page 3, you're going to read about war crimes. ICC 6 arrest of Netanyahu, 3 Hamas leaders as well, and dramatic Kenyan visit by Iranian leader Raisi that rattled Washington. You're going to read that story on page 43 as well. That's what it is this morning, really, in terms of our dailies. Majorities of the stories have been covered on our website, that is on www.lookuptv.co.ke, on our social media platforms at Lookuptv across all of them. Guess what? Take a breather. We come back with the news this morning. Welcome back. For the third consecutive week, junior secondary school teachers in various counties have boycotted entering classrooms, pressuring the Teacher Service Commission, TSC, to comply with the High Court's directive for permanent employment. And as John Matava now opens this morning, the teachers are vowed to stand firm until the government fulfills their demands, despite the threats.
In the third consecutive week now, JSS teachers have vowed not to relent until the government fulfills their demands despite threats from the Teachers Service Commission. During the peaceful demonstrations in Kisumu County, led by Justice Odhiambo, they have criticized the TSC for neglecting JSS teachers instead of advocating for their conditions.
They are threatening our teachers here, telling them, can you go back to school? Warudi shule. Even the head of institution, they are threatening us, but we are not going back. They are giving wrong data to Teacher Service Commission that teachers are present. Look at here, this is Eldoret. We have over 800 here teachers on strike, but if you look at the data today, they are telling the Teacher Service Commission that teachers are in school, but we are not there. I'm a teacher, I'm here in Eldoret, but you will find my name, I'm present. So that is wrong.
14 days meant for appeal has elapsed. And
in Nandi County today, they have ended service delivery in government offices in Kapsabet town, pressuring the Teachers Service Commission to comply with the High Court directive to employ teachers on permanent basis.
We ask TSC to follow the court ruling and to confirm and compensate us, because even the president says that he'll be following the court rulings.
The teachers have vowed not to accept defeat in their efforts to secure better employment terms and have given TSC 1 week to confirm JSS teachers under permanent and pensionable terms. John Matava, Lookuptv, Nairobi.
Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua has called on international organizations to support programs aimed at addressing the effects of climate change in the country. Rigathi stated that the government has implemented strategies to tackle events such as drought, heavy rainfall and recent floods witnessed in the country.
Speaking on Monday when he hosted the Common Board of Trustees of the Center for International Forestry Research and the International Center for Research in Agroforestry at his official residence in Karen, Nairobi, the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua said that the ongoing program targeting 15 billion trees by 2032 could greatly benefit from the partner support.
And the people of this great country have come to terms with reality is that climate change is real. And therefore, as a government, we have come up with a program to grow 15 billion trees by the year 2032. I'm very encouraged by Kenya, the issue of fruit trees, because much as we're asking Kenyans to grow trees, we need to encourage them by taking them to a direction that also has a benefit.
The Deputy President also called on them to boost restoration of Nairobi River, saying that their input is critical in ensuring the success of the program.
I also want to appeal you support us in the restoration of Nairobi rivers. We have a program for the restoration of Nairobi River that is under very serious pollution, and we have a very serious program. And I think both C4 ICRAF and ICRAF Kenya can play a role to assist us in terms of technical advice, in terms of resource mobilization.
International Center for Research in Agroforestry Director General Elaine Ubaljoro said that having ICRAF headquarters in Nairobi strengthens relationship ties between Kenya and other countries, adding that they are ready to support the government projects of planting at least 15 billion trees while insisting on increasing agricultural productivity.
In view of the government's commitment of 15 billion trees, we were talking, Excellency, about the right tree for the right purpose in the right place, and the real importance of growing trees and not just planting trees. And we really see this as critical in terms of how to increase agricultural productivity towards a net zero, nature positive agricultural system.
Maureen Bosire, Lookuptv.
Auditor General Nancy Gathungu has criticized the proposed 2024-2025 budget, highlighting gaps such as reducing the budget for proposed projects by 500 million shillings in Nairobi and 300 million shillings in Mombasa counties. Stanley Lugare with more.
The aggregated budget has been reduced by about 985 billion from the previous year's estimated expenditure of 4.4 billion in some sampled programs which have indicated in the table on flood mitigation and food security initiatives.
Auditor General Nancy Gathungu says the 2024-2025 budget is set to increase to 1.85 trillion shillings, up from 1.79 trillion shillings in supplementary budget to 2023-2024, further faulting the government under the proposed budget for failing to allocate for learners and learning institutions, including TVETs, as well as the government not utilizing the 7 billion shillings in contingence fund for the current emergencies, including floods.
You're asking for more personal emolument, and at the same time, you are saying that you do not have space. I look at a number of 150. Employ 150, that means you require more space. Do you have space for such?
As I previously presented to this committee, the ministries, departments and agencies are not using the contingencies fund for urgent and unforeseen needs as guided by Article 208 and Article 223 of the Constitution and Section 21 of the Public Finance Management Act 2012.
Gathungu says delays in the release of exchequer funding have resulted in delayed service delivery for the institution, calling on the Budget and Appropriations Committee chaired by Kiaru lawmaker Ndindi Nyoro to intervene, as she faulted the proposed budget for inadequate resource allocation to key and crucial institutions in the country.
You allocated additional resources for that, or that is why you want to employ more. In which case, Chair, if this the reduction on personal emolument would affect the implementation of the Office of the Auditor General on this particular program, then I think this reduction should be reinstated.
The auditor has requested the committee to ensure the reinstatement of the cut budget for the institution to enable it to execute its constitutional mandate, with the committee urging Gadungu to consider cutting expenditures by projecting to own a headquarters, which will save massively on the 180 million annual arrears on rent, while appearing before the Budget and Appropriations Committee for the proposed budget for the financial year 2024-2025 and the supplementary budget estimates to 2023-2024.
You can clarify about the costing, because that being the case, then if we have to measure the amount of money you are dispensing as rent or expenditure, it will take 30 years for us to recover the investments of 6 billion, given your 180 million currently, which is expected.
The review of the 2024-2025 budget estimates indicates inadequate allocations for recovery programs like flood mitigation and food security, signaling potential issues with other competing priorities and underestimation of envisaged risks.
Stanley Lugaria, Lookuptv, Nairobi.
Government spokesperson Isaac Mwaura during his visit to the government project in Nakuru County revealed plans to visit various counties to ensure that all government projects are completed. Speaking in Nakuru County, Mwaura stated that the initiative aims to ensure that every Kenyan benefits from the project.
Government spokesperson Isaac Mwaura today in his visit to Nakuru County has indicated that the government has set aside funds to make cooking oil and they already have seeds that will be given to farmers so that they can benefit from the project yet to be started.
Karibu zaidi ya shilingi bilioni 40 na pia watu tayari wale ambao bado hawajafidiwa watapatiwa pesa zao, na wale ambao wanaishi mle kazi za msulubu za mikono 70% ni zao, lakini hizi kazi za utaaluma 30% na zingine kuingineko, na itakuwa ni msaada mkubwa sana kwa sababu yale maji yataweza kupata faida na kampuni ya Nawasco itaweza kuwa ikishughulikia swali hilo.
He further added that they will highlight the pyrethrum issue and the government has already increased the number of acres from 4,000 to 30,000 while calling on farmers to take the opportunity of this project so that they can benefit greatly.
Tutaangalia masuala ya pareto, na pareto tayari serikali inataka kuongeza idadi ya ekari kutoka 4,000 mpaka ekari 30,000 ukifikia mwaka.
She revealed that Kenyans should be prepared of the heavy rain expected to rain.
Naweza kuelezwa hapa kwamba tuliwapoteza katika hii county watu 63, 60 wakiwa kule Mai Mahiu na 3 kule Molo.
Residents of Kugeria Street in Kiambu are concerned about the health hazard posed by the sewage canal flowing from their street, which has overflowed into their homes. Beatrice Ndanu now reports.
Frank Kamau, a resident of Kugeria Street, whose land has more than 3 acres of farm filled by sewage water with foul smell.
And we're here at Kugeria Estate of Kiambu.
Kamau mentioned that the sewage canal's origin is a septic sewer within the estate. They reported the issue to the estate management and to NEMA Kiambu County. Despite the director acknowledging the situation, no action has been taken even after 2 weeks.
Last several weeks we have been facing the predicament of the discharge of sewer water and effluent from a neighboring estate. And that is the estate that is behind me, and basically there has been a lot of nuisance. As you can see, we have a whole lake of sewer behind me, and we have tried to talk to the management of the estate, but they've not been very helpful. We also reported this to NEMA, and we are still waiting for some action to be taken.
Charles Juma, a livestock farmer in the vicinity, highlighted that due to their residences and farmland being submerged, they've been compelled to sell their livestock at drastically reduced prices.
Kuku wenye nilikuwa nalisha hapa hivi walikuwa kuku 1,275 na ng'ombe nao walikuwa ng'ombe 7 pamoja na kondoo 7.
Similarly, Patricia Bugua, another resident, expressed concern that sewage water is infiltrating their homes and has contaminated the main water supply managed by the Nairobi Water and Sewerage Company.
Built just on the lower side. When it rains so much, all the
Transportation came to a halt on the Machakos-Kangundo Road after the Kenya National Highways Authority, KENHA, began clearing a rock debris that had blocked parts of the road due to poor air quality. This and more in the county round.
Residents of Siricho and Gubatu in the South Isiolo constituency have complained about the poor condition of the road between Mogadashu and Siricho following heavy rainfall in the island areas, which has caused the Ewasonyiro River to break its banks.
Watoto wamepata tabu. Wengi wametoka upande ya town, wengi wanatoka Isiolo, Garbatula, sehemu zingine ambaye wanasoma hii shule. Wametaabika na hii mto saa hii tunaona kama imepungua maji. Lakini kwa wiki moja iliyopita haipitiki. Watu wanatumia kamba kusafirisha watu hapa kwa hii mto. Sisi hatuna namna nyingine ya usafiri kati ya Siricho na Modogashe ajili ya hii mto. Sasa tunalilia kwa viongozi ambaye tuliwachagua na serikali ya kwamba ili watusaidie kwa vile sisi hatuna namna na ile barabara tuko nayo ni hii peke yake.
Travel operators on the Machakos-Kangundo Road came to a standstill as KENHA took action to remove a falling rock debris, blocking a section of the road due to adverse weather conditions. Motorists were diverted to alternative routes as KENHA closed the dangerous Kwamvilu Road for safety reasons.
Serikali imetuambia miaka mingi habari ya hii mto. Watakuja kututengenezea daraja, watakuja kuweka makarabat na hawaeki. Sasa wakiwaji wa Mkemba tumeamua leo tutajitokeza tukuje tutengeneze at least kidogo watoto wetu ndio wakienda shule waweze kuacha kutaabika hapa.
A smile for cleft lip treatment is making a significant step in transforming the lives of children affected by cleft lips. Healthcare professionals and volunteers aim to provide comprehensive treatment and support to those in need. Each child receives personalized care aimed at restoring their confidence and quality of life.
In 100 children when wamezaliwa, 10 of them they are affected na hiyo cleft palate na cleft lip. Tunafanya medical creatiness awareness ya wale watoto wamezaliwa na mdomo umepasuka na wengine wako na shimo katikati ya mdomo. Tumekuwa tukiwatafuta kutoka kaunti zote. Tumezunguka so far, tumeenda kaunti 21. Tumebakisha kwenda hizo kaunti zingine na tunatarajia tutapata hao watoto ama watu wazima wenye wako na hiyo ugonjwa, manake ni wengi wamefichwa.
Stephanie Google, Lookuptv.
President William Ruto landed at the Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport in Atlanta, Georgia yesterday afternoon, kicking off a bustling full-day trip to the United States. The inaugural visit by an African leader in 15 years is anticipated to bolster relations with the United States and facilitate investment opportunities. here's the thing, that particular story right there, we got to look at it in two perspectives. One, that the hope is that this essentially signals the continued partnerships between the United States of America and Kenya. That it's been 15 years since an African president was given a red carpet treatment in the United States. What this means for the country, we talked about it this morning. It's at a time when, indeed, the last man to do that, you say that, was when George W. Bush invited Ghana's John Kufuor to the White House in 2008, and also the Liberian president as well. Talk about that this morning. Right here on the Morning Drift at Lookuptv across all the social media platforms. I am Akiaga Symbolics. See you on the other side of the break.
Are you an SME looking for a media partner? Look no more, as Lookuptv got you covered for all your visibility and marketing needs. We at Lookuptv understand your business needs and want to work with you on your marketing journey, giving you solutions that will take you to the next level. Call us today on 0707 572 358 or send an email to sales@lookuptv.co.ke and kickstart this amazing journey. Welcome to Lookuptv, your official SME media partner.
Kuambia asante kwa hizi zawadi zilizotuletea leo, na kama zimetoka Mungu atarudisha zingine, na tumewakaribisha tena. Asante.
If you want to have a proper outlook of the economy, then you have to speak to the walls and gears of the integral businesses in the country.
And I want to be able to make the youths and everybody coming up in Kenya know that this is here locally.
Men and women in the thick of the burst of markets rising and falling, fighting to make their business decisions stick.
I've always lived in my career that I can never be late.
You need to train by yourself. You need to practice by yourself. Then from there you can compose yourself and give kind of services like this.
On season 2 of the Captain's Arena, we seek the inside of the minds, predict the shift in the markets, get inspiration to start and make sense of it all.
Just watch what everybody else is doing and just make sure you're giving back to the society.
Oof. This is the Captain's Arena.
Taarifa zinapochipuka na kutufikia papa hapa kwenye makao makuu ya chumba cha habari cha runinga ya Lookup, kwenye taifa, kwenye serikali, kwenye bunge, tunajitosa hadi kwenye sauti ya wenyeji ili kupata tu maoni ya wenyeji kuhusu masuala haya yanayochipuka.
Maana hii kitu inaenda kuumiza Mkenya kwa tax.
Hakuna kitu tunafurahia, nothing, absolutely nothing.
Sisi tunaumia, si ati tunaumia ile ya kiukweli. Juu maisha ni ngumu.
na bila shaka tunapata maoni yao ili sauti yao ipate kusikika, na watasema hili waseme lile, watasema hiki na waseme kile, almuradi sauti yao ipate taa.
Mambo ya mafuta tena imekuwa ni changamoto zaidi kwa kila mtu wa bodaboda.
Uchumi ikikuwa stable, tunaamini mambo itakuwa sawa sawa.
Kwanza alikuwa na ria wasa wa boda, mama mboga nini. Hao sasa ndio wamefinywa zaidi man.
Mpenzi mtazamaji, hii ni bunge la wenyeji.
So this is how we create an art piece.
Some say it's organized chaos, while others say it is a way of survival. For Alex Kamanjiri, art is an avenue to say what he would have otherwise lacked words to express. Like many artists, it took an outsider to make him realize his knack for the arts.
First of all, it did not start like a dream. It was a lie. Yeah. While I was in high school in Form 2, I drew a portrait of an old man smoking, and my friends lied to me that it was really nice, and I believed in the lie, and I started practicing slowly. YouTube, most of my skills I've learned from YouTube, and soon enough I became good. I became that lie, became that good.
In line with the legendary 10,000 hours rule, Alex says he has put in the work and is certainly on his way to achieve true expertise. He reminisces proudly the first time he earned from this trade.
Okay, yeah, it was a portrait of an old madam. Yeah, she wanted me to draw her. Then I remember it was a small A3 size piece. Yeah. It was really nice. It was a really high pressure because once you're used to drawing just for yourself and you're being given a commission for the first time, there's a lot of pressure in your head. Not because you're good, because you think you want to put your best into it. So.
At the sound of art, many people think of a drawing, but rarely do we think of bids on an art piece.
I used to do portraits, a lot of portraits using pencil. And in the gallery that I exhibit, I saw a piece by a lady called Christine Okuma. I've never met her. I would love to meet her one day. It was a mixed media art. It was a kitenge and some beads. Yeah, if I'm right, yeah. So some triangular abstract work. And an idea popped up. So why don't I mix these beads and the portraits that I make? Let me try out. And then I tried out, and the response from my friends and the people who love my work are like, yeah, should try this more.
Wood, glue, beads, pencils, just to name a few of the tools required. The process can be demanding.
It depends with the size and also the size of the beads that you're using. Yeah, and also the intricacies, because there are some more detailed artworks than others.
When swamped with work, Alex retreats because time is an essential part of the craft.
And we start by sketching the piece. And this piece is already sketched and it's already painted. So the reason as to why we paint before is because the beads has holes. And the holes, if the background is different from the image, it will create a different effect. So you have to paint the background first. And let's do a part that we've already painted. Where do we? Okay, let's start by this part here. So you start by placing the wood glue. We use wood glue because it's on plywood. Make sure it does not spread. Slowly, take your time. And then after that, normally I use a biro, but you put the beads first. You don't just spread, but you can also use something that has a sharp tip, like this, by placing it and arranging it slowly. First we start with the edges. Move them slowly.
After all the time, energy and creativity, it's no wonder why art pieces are deemed expensive.
I'm doing my own project. Most of the time it might be more expensive because it's my own project. But there's some images that I just create that I sell at a reasonable price, depending on the size and the intricacies, the details and stuff. For example, the A3s, most of the time they range between 5 to 12K. The A3s, this is an A3. And as we go up, the money goes up.
With art galleries steadily becoming popular around Nairobi, this 21-year-old artist is keen on penetrating the market.
Currently, I'm exhibiting at a gallery in Karen, Waterfront Mall. It's called the Gallery. And on Saturdays, I take my works to a market. It's called Organic Farmers Market. Yeah, it's also in Karen, around Karen area, Marula Lane. That's where currently I'm getting most of my sales, the gallery and the market. But also I get from people from IG, from the net. They reach out if they want portraits or if they like what I've posted and they want to buy, they also contact me there.
For 2 years now in the beaded art world, his inspiration comes from everyday life experiences, emotions, and the power of observation.
Sometimes it comes in words, sometimes it comes in images. So I have to write things down. I have a diary where I write my ideas from.
As an artist, Alex hopes the pieces he makes will capture a moment in time. But many times, the complexities that exist within the art world are a handful.
I can say it's a risk to some extent, because you never know. You never know if you're going to earn from it or not. So by taking that risk, because Kenya art is not as appreciated as other countries.
Youth Affairs, Arts and Sports Cabinet Secretary Babu Namwamba has been on a mission to revive the art scene in the country, which has for years not yielded much for the creatives. For Alex, the culture should be inculcated in our everyday life.
Just let the artist be. Because me, I can say I was blessed to have a father who accepted me as an artist. Like, he was like, this is a statement he actually said, as long as you're not killing or stealing, you do your thing. That's what he said.
With the hope of one day being his own boss, consistency is his gospel.
They say that art is the journey of a free soul, and for Alex Kamanjiri, he is only just beginning to explore the colors and turn the chaos into beautiful pieces. Nancy Nalima, Lookuptv, Kowinda, Karen, Nairobi.
Start your day with a workout routine, an exciting moment of exercise that is simple but powerful for your ultimate fitness. Build your strength, shape and body muscles with lunges, push-ups, squats, burpees, planks, dumbbells and more. Let's work out every Monday to Saturday from 6:30 a.m. on Fitness Zone, a one surefire way to attack your fitness regimen effectively.
All right. Welcome back to the Morning Drift. My name is Simba Elijah Charles. There's so much to talk about, two things that you're going to talk about. But if you can, Sheila, let's start like this. Let's go back to the Standard. This morning, they've got a very interesting story right there that has caught the eyes of majority of Kenyans. And we're going to look at it in a very special way this morning. Just before I introduce the gentleman who's already in the studio this morning. Now, And I will start like this then. If you look at the top right corner of the Standard this morning, they've got something interesting that you and I have to look at. I mean, the trending story right now is that the president is not in the country. He's already started his 4-day tour at the United States of America. But here's the thing then. On the top right corner, left corner, sorry, the U.S. visit, the joy and comfort of flying Hustler jets. They call it like that. The story has been covered on page 8 and 9. So the total amount of money that Kenyans have to pay throughout this period, the president out of the country for those 4 days, has been estimated to be around 241 million shillings. That is close to 500 million. That's the total amount. It's gone for 4 days. And we're going to talk about that this morning. Fly out in the official jet. It is a jet that you have to get. It's 2.4 million an hour to fly that thing. And then when you put in the total cost, then all curious Kenyans are putting it at about 241 million shillings to take the president out of the country and return him safely after 4 days. But we should be celebrating because he landed safely at the hands of that 7-year-old jet. All right, that is going to be part of the discussion this morning, but also looking at what are going to be the benefits of that state visit then of the president to the United States of America this morning. Prof is with us in the studio. Prof, how are you doing, sir?
Fine, thank you, my brother.
Happy to have you around.
All is well, yes.
Here's the thing. Let's talk about it. I'm going to read this story because we do have it for you this morning, and this is where we are. That President William Ruto landed at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport in Atlanta, Georgia. That is yesterday afternoon, kicking off a bustling 4-day trip to the United States. The inaugural visit by an African leader in 15 years is anticipated to bolster relations with the United States and facilitate investment opportunities. Let's take a look at this one. Once we come back, Prof and I will open that discussion. In the United States of America. And there's so much that we got to talk about. It goes all the way back to when President William Ruto and Uhuru Kenyatta essentially came into office, because the United States of America took a particular concern about the leadership of the two gentlemen. Let's talk about it then, Prof.
Yes.
What we're going to talk about it. This is a long conversation that we're going to get into this morning on this particular visit. If you were to talk about it, Prof.
Yes.
As an introduction to this particular subject this morning, there's so much talking points. The first African leader after 15 years. It is President Dr. William Ruto who's been given that state visit to the United States of America. You can look at the amount of money that the country has to fork to get the president in the United States of America for 4 days. But you can also decide, Prof, to talk about the good things, or what is going to be the ramifications of the president visiting the United States of America in terms of investment and the relationships between those two countries. Where are you going to start from?
I think it's always good to start from does this entail to Kenya?
Yes.
Especially on the positive side of it.
That's it.
Because you see, we should not always be looking at the negative side of it. The fact that the president has been invited for a state visit has some significance in the Kenyan geopolitical, let's say, space, because you see, all countries in Africa are looking and saying, who is next? Of course, all heads of state in Africa are saying, who is going to be the next one? Because we are talking about the last African head of state to be able to have a state visit there was Ellen Johnson. Unfortunately for Kenya now, is that the right to address the Congress has been turned down, in spite of the fact that it was looking like it was already mentioned in Kenya. He's going to be the first one to address. He's going to be, I don't know what. So, in spite of all that, no way to say it that Kenya is appearing in most of the headlines in Africa for now. At the same time, Kenya is appearing in some of the global, let's say, news agencies. CNN, Sky News will cover this. Yes. BBC will cover this. You see, whenever you are on the headline of these nations, there must be something being sold about Kenya. Someone can just think about sports. Maybe someone can think about visiting Kenya. Yes. So there's a lot of things that can come there. But also the fact that the president has landed in Atlanta, Georgia. You know what the city Atlanta, Georgia is known for? This is the city that is known with all the history of civil rights movement. In fact, for an African head of state to land in Atlanta, Georgia, also is a symbolic thing that an African is going back to where the civil rights movement actually began the journey of liberation in the U.S. So it's very historic. You could see, if you go to Atlanta, Georgia, you'll see so many black communities there. And I'm sure maybe there are also very many Kenyans there. So even welcome by Kenyans is something that also is very symbolic to welcome their head of state. Remember, you like it or not, as opposed to other countries, your passport is written that His Excellency the President ask you to afford this gentleman or woman all the countries needed to travel, all our passports, including Raila Odinga's passport. So because of that, we always have to pride on our own head of state. There must be, it's a day of pride. I think Kenyans should take this of pride by saying our head of state is getting the attention that it deserves by being welcome at White House and especially in the U.S. And also, if you look at the program talking about the issue of the U.S. trade, there's the trade agreement between the U.S. and Kenya being discussed. You realize the issue of security being discussed. Remember, security is becoming an issue here. And security, remember, if Iranian president can fall down from the sky, that's not security. Remember General Gola's death here. Also remember the issues of Kenya has been seen as a beacon of peace in East Africa. And I also told you the other day that the two most important countries in Africa, you know those two countries? Is Kenya and South Africa. If no country can access Kenya and South Africa in from the West, they are so concerned. Because without Kenya, you cannot access the Middle East, which is an important trade region. And because if you cannot access South Africa, also you cannot be able to access the Southern Cape is very important in accessing so many parts of Africa. Yes. So these two countries remain very important. That's why the British had interest in two of them. Until now, British has never left their interest. In fact, Americans have aligned with the British. So if you look at all this, it's so important, not just in the US, but also in Europe. Remember that British guidance in Africa, you know, Britain guides a lot from the US. British become like almost the consultants of Americans because Americans never colonized Africa. Yet Americans have interest in Africa. Whom can they consult? Britain, because Britain are among the most solid colonizers that colonize Africa. So for me, for the image of it, reputation is it, will bring a lot of reputation to Africa and also to Kenya for that matter. And it's good to start looking on from the view on what can you get. Because sometimes I'm being told some of them who don't like the president might spend too much time demonizing him that might not see the advantages of all this happening there. Remember, we are also visiting the US at a time when there is not much political tussle between the opposition and the ruling government because actually they are in bed together. You saw Raila Odinga was escorting Museveni the other day. Raila Odinga having state functions, going to State House, having meals prepared by Rachel. And you can see William Ruto has landed there with his counter suit, holding the First Lady, receiving flowers. Those are very good things to talk about in images. I'm sure some of them will pick them and put them in images that will tell Kenya. The other thing is about tourism being discussed. You remember that the tourism has always reduced, and because of security, we have always had less visitors coming here. I also think there should be a discussion about the issue of financing. There are some projects maybe you always have to get some goodies being thrown here and there. The only thing is that at what condition, and what is going to be a challenge here is the issue of Haiti being discussed. I'm sure that you have seen that a petition has been prepared by my friend Ekuru Akot, Philip Kisia, saying that they have actually petitioned Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, UN Security Council, asking them that Kenya should not deploy these police officers to Haiti. At the same time, he's believing that actually it's unconstitutional in Kenya, and I'm sure that's going to be a difficult thing for the president.
Yes.
Remember, the president going to address the U.S. press and international press as the Rose Garden in White House. That's a very symbolic place to be. I don't know how it looks like. I've been there myself, but I don't know how the feeling there. I was there when the president for what is his name? I'm just forgetting his name. I was there when the president for this country, Cuba, Fidel Castro was there. I happened to be an advisor for South American Economic Bloc, and I happened to be standing there when Fidel Castro was addressing the nation with George Bush. And it's a very remarkable place. Even to stand there, you feel the energies. I'm sure all these Kenyans are looking for. And the most important thing here is that people can say the president is a liar or whatever it is, but the president is eloquent. So the eloquence of the president in this Rose Garden, no one doubts it. No one doubts that he would say something that can hit global headlines. So also looking for those opportunities, then we harvest them. Then after we come back here and solve our domestic issues. Remember, you cannot take your international problems, in your domestic issues, international space. But when you come home, we fight.
Yes.
Like for you, you left home. There could be, some of us are married, you leave home when your wife has an issue with you, but when you leave the bedroom and get out of the sitting room, you embrace yourself, you smile even if you didn't smile in the house.
Yes.
When you come back home, you deal with them. So the president has to know, in spite of those international, let's say, goodwill is going to create, still the issues come home is, how is that going to reduce the cost of unga? How is it going to affect the cost of fuel? How is it reducing the debt in the country? How is it stimulating the economy?
Yes.
Remember, the headline is showing Gachagua will oppose your tax, and that's the headline of Kenya when you're in the U.S. So domestic issues remain domestic issues. But for now, I urge Kenyans, take time to enjoy this moment because it does not come very often.
That's it. Pretty much. Proper introduction, and we're going to get into the basics of that, Prof. This morning, also I want to introduce to you Reverend Mark Echakara, who's a transformational leadership and governance expert. Reverend, how are you doing, sir?
I'm good, I'm good.
Prof, this morning has decided to play the Kenyan card. Here's the thing. Our domestic problems right now, the way we view our president, put it on the side, and let's present a Kenyan leader to the United States government, an African leader to the United States government. It'll come back and we'll keep on telling them what our problems are. But for now, let's look at the good side. Just like I started, there's so many ways that you can look at this particular issue, Reverend. You might look at it as the amount of money that is costing the taxpayers to get President Ruto in the United States for 4 days. It's been put at about 240 million plus this morning. Again, you might look at it and say, well, let's talk about the benefits that are going to accrue from the visit. That's just like the prophet said it this morning. But what is going to be your view? If you're told to introduce this subject, give us a perspective. What are we supposed to look at and focus on this morning?
Well, first of all, Kiage, thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure meeting my brother Prof again. I believe what Prof has said is very, very important. Yes. He is basically put it the best way that anyone could possibly do. As a nation right now, not just right now, anytime any nation, however big or small, when your leader goes out of your country on a foreign trip, regardless of which country, whether it is Kenya going to Uganda or the president of Somalia coming to Nairobi or whatever, you see, the president of a nation is always the nation's marketer number one, is the nation's diplomat number one. In terms of projecting Kenya's position and Kenya's strategic position in the geopolitical aspects in the region, the president is always our diplomat number one. So as a nation, we expect the president to be the person who is best positioned to articulate issues concerning Kenya and Kenya's interests in the international community, and to be the one who is best positioned to be able to be our marketer number one. So that whoever sees the president out there sees the image of Kenya.
Yes.
And as Prof has rightly said, whenever a president of any nation, leave alone Africa, just any nation, gets an official invite to the White House. Remember, the United States is the world's largest economy and superpower. And so there is that of perception and the implications on many other aspects of the nation, the economy, the social and the political aspects. So there's always that the benefits that come with the perception that it generates. One, it generates the perception that Kenya is very strategic. If it is very strategic for the U.S., then other nations definitely must begin to view Kenya differently, regardless of its domestic challenges.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Good. Prof.
Yes.
Let's then talk about it. Let's look at this relation between the United States of America and Kenya currently as it is. I want to remind you of the progress or the history of President Dr. William Ruto. If you do remember, when they were taking over in 2013, they had a big case at The Hague. And if you looked at where the United States of America sort of leaned toward, they were against this particular ticket. They made themselves clear that indeed we do not support that particular ticket because these two gentlemen have been implicated at The Hague. How did that change? How did that change, Prof?
Well, actually, I think that's very interesting. Yeah. You know, when you know about the international diplomacy, geopolitics, you understand that thing easier than anything else. And I always said, my brother, you know, every country has national interests and every country has vulnerabilities.
Yes.
So as Americans continue preaching about choices have consequences, and then they start talking about the fact that there should be essential contacts. Remember that statement called essential contacts? That the president, that is Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, could only land in the U.S. if there is some need for essential contacts, meaning either they are very sick or there should be something very serious that warrants them coming there. Not just like a state visit like this one. Then they discovered that there was a challenge in the Middle East. I told you, there was a challenge in the Middle East. ISIS was rising. Insecurity around the Middle East was rising. And who has that gate to the Middle East? It's Kenya. And if the head of state of Kenya has the keys to solve the issues in the Middle East, whom do you go to? So Americans withdrew that thing, essential contacts, and said, now our national interest is that we must work with Kenya.
Yes.
And therefore they change all that. And once they threw it away forever. And look at now, the cases actually ended in the ICC. They are no longer an issue in ICC. There's no threat of cases against Uhuru Kenyatta, because if there was, now he's a civilian. Why didn't you come for him? William Ruto also, the cases were cleared. How they are cleared, don't ask me. All I know that they're no longer there.
Yes.
So with that changed a lot of narrative, because I told you, Now that they knew Uhuru did his 10 years, with the 10 years, with the challenges in the Middle East, ISIS were rising. Remember how they're even recruiting some Kenyans. You saw that happening. They were recruiting young people. They are going to become a threat. Remember, there are so many challenges. You know, America do not rule, especially by imposing their threat directly. America rules through what's called alliances. America is not a superpower because they are military everywhere. America rules through alliance forces. Just the fact that UK is an alliance with them, Kenya has an alliance with them, they control the world through soft power. So with these all matters, it was essential that they had to change their policy against, or if you like, towards Kenya. And also at the same time, Uhuru Kenyatta delivered so much for them as well. Remember, there were so many negotiations happening between US and Kenya. The US-Kenya trade that is going to now actually be furthered much more by William Ruto started when Uhuru Kenyatta was the president. Remember, Uhuru Kenyatta took up the presidency that looked towards the east because Kibaki was more the east. He didn't look west like now Ruto is looking west. Uhuru was quasi-west, east. You could not know exactly because he could be able to do some work with the west, but also do some work with the east. But now it looks that Ruto is more clearly a western-looking president. And you see, with them knowing that Ruto was more a western-looking president, mark my word, when you saw Ruto landing in the US with Musalia Mudavadi during his campaign, he received near state welcome. When Raila Odinga landed in the US, he looked like someone who went to buy an iPad and some shoes. I'm sure the pictures I saw was him sitting somewhere with his iPad and new shoes, but William Ruto landed like a king to be. So you could see that the policies around Kenya and looking at the direction Kenya was going began during Uhuru. Maybe Americans had intelligence that Ruto will win the presidency. And that's why they treated him even before. If you look at those videos, when he landed in the US, before becoming head of state, he was deputy president. He had one of the best treatment ever. Raila Odinga, who was, people were believing here in Kenya, was going to be the next president. His landing there was a bit of, it was underwhelming, if you like. So this policy had been seen before. And the issue continued. Look at immediately William Ruto is elected, president-elect, before being confirmed by Supreme Court. You saw so many American big shots coming here, like Coons came and told Uhuru, if at all Supreme Court announces themselves confirming Ruto as the head of state, please hand over power. I'm sure that was the headline. So what we are seeing today is not that we just woke up and some miracle happens to America. Americans don't accept miracles. Remember, America is one of the countries with a very solid foreign fiscal policies. And Americans always stick by their policy. And I'm sure this is what Kenyans can actually go learn. The other day I saw Museveni coming here, and I heard some signing saying that we need to learn from Museveni. Museveni we can learn from, but Museveni cannot learn too much from us. But now William Ruto has a chance with these foreign ministers and foreign people in the Ministerial Corps to sit down with America and actually to learn what is the American policy. How do they implement them that they remain a superpower even if they are not now as strong economically compared to China? Chinese have put a lot of money in Africa, but how comes Chinese with all their money, they still just look like a third world country in terms of reputation, but American, having lost a lot of times in their economic progress, still holds on to that power.
Pretty much. Prof, but once you start thinking about this,
yes,
because even as we talk about the change of a view of President Dr. William Ruto by the United States of America, has been championing him. Pan-Africanism is a thing that makes the United States of America a bit uneasy. Because they're saying that Africa has to start to stand by itself. These expensive loans, this view that we have to be summoned by a president of the United States or in Europe has to stop now. I will be coming back to you on that. Reverend, on that particular one, I mean, when did it change? Because all of a sudden, the United States of America were essentially against that particular ticket, President Uhuru Kenyatta and Ruto ticket, because of the Hague implications. Just like Prof is rightly saying, it was a bit unconventional how those cases ended. If you do remember, there were heavy allegations of witness intimidations, witness withdrawals, and just lack of evidence from the Kenyan side. How did it change?
Well, just like any other case,
yes.
whether a case that involves a village chicken thief,
yes.
and there are witnesses, there's always that aspect of witness interference. So it's not something that is unique to this case.
Yes.
And whether that indeed did happen or not is neither here nor there, because we cannot confirm. As it is right now, they remain allegations. There were allegations, just like you rightfully put it. And and as Prof has put it, just from where the U.S. stands, not just the U.S. alone, just any other nation, their interests come first. You know, you don't take absolute. Even, you see, right now we know that, we all know that one of the biggest rivals, or probably the biggest rivals and threats to the U.S. Hegemony and the U.S. dominance of world affairs is China. And China's policies are extreme, but somehow, the U.S. has to find a way to work with China. So in this case, it was not about Kenya.
Yes.
It was about two individuals who had interests in the leadership of the nation.
Doesn't.
The U.S. did not have any issues with Kenya. Kenya has always been a very strategic partner of the U.S. in terms of its influence, this side of the world. So as far as the U.S. is concerned, the fact that these men stood indicted and there were active cases involving them, they were a bit cautious.
Yes.
And they did not just remain silently cautious, but they made it known as much that they were not really excited about this ticket, considering that these two individuals have active cases in the International Criminal Court. So, but then, like Prof has rightly put it, after that, when the Supreme Court confirmed the election of our former president, Uhuru Kenyatta and William Samoei Ruto,
yes,
the U.S. immediately began to work with them because they were now officially the leaders of Kenya. So that is where things are. When it comes to international relations, there are no extreme decisions. It doesn't matter how countries don't agree in terms of policy or there's serious departure. There always has to be a convergence of thoughts as far as national interests are concerned.
At what point are you, in your submission, and Prof, I also want to think about that, I'll be coming to you. At what point in your submission are you going to give the excuse of that was a different president? Now that we have a different president in the House, maybe it becomes a different issue for the United States?
No, it doesn't. William Samoei then was still the deputy president, together with Uhuru Kenyatta.
Yes.
And so over time, because Uhuru Kenyatta and William Samoei Ruto served 2 terms, so they were in government together.
Yes.
The U.S. was interacting with both of them. Yes. So in the process of time, the U.S. also, and their embassy in Kenya and the ambassadors, they also developed a working relationship with William Samoei Ruto. Because remember, for these nations and any other nation outside there is always the aspect of looking at the future, beyond. You don't just project your relationships with other nations short term. They look long term. They scan around the nation. They look at people who are active in politics, people who have expressed interests in national leadership, and they look at all of them, their policies, their leanings, whether you're leaning towards the East, extremists or what, they look at all those people. So they keep tracking them, their political development. So I believe that over the past 10 years, the U.S. and all other nations have been tracking William Samoei Ruto because they can see the trajectory of his political journey, and they can see this man stands a chance of being the next president. So I am very, very sure that they must have been tracking him and they saw in him a person whom they could work with.
That's it.
Going forward.
Pretty much. Let me recognize the presence of Peter Wasiaga, one who has my name. I should be calling him Simba this morning. How are you doing, sir?
Very fine, Simba.
Karibu sana. I'll be crossing over to you so we get into this conversation.
Yes.
Prof, let's say it for what it is.
Yes.
Every time the president has gotten an international stage, he speaks like a man who's saying it's time for Africa to remove itself from the shackles of the West and the East.
Yes.
That now is a time for Africa to start making its own decisions, to the point that the last time it goes to that stage, everybody started questioning Ruto's ideals and views about Pan-Africanism.
Yeah.
That is essentially a man, in other words, who's saying, no, we do not want to be governed and ruled. We are not coming to beg for deals. We do not want you to help us best tone your ideals.
Yes.
You would like to think that then this would have not been the best time for President Dr. William Ruto to visit the United States of America because of the independence of that thought that we as African leaders need to be as independent as we can be. Does that threaten this relationship that is trying to establish with the United States of America?
You know, I usually tell people that political decisions and even diplomatic decisions are black and white, only that people don't want to see it like that. What am I trying to say here? As far as I'm concerned, Americans are not so much concerned about the rhetorics we do here in this country. Everyone knows that Ruto is not a typical Pan-Africanist. People know that.
Why would you say that?
Because of the policies he's making. We are not concerned about someone saying we will no longer listen to Americans, we will never suck to the Western nations. They are looking at where is your debt coming from, who is funding you, isn't it? How are you doing your fiscal policy? And remember, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u stood in the middle of Parliament, like he's got a stand next month, and said, I first of all take chance, before he read his speech, I first of all take this chance to thank our development partners for 3 reasons. 1, for policy direction. So if they are giving you policy direction, why are you telling us you're Pan-Africanist? And they say 2, for availing resources, isn't it? Which means they're offering funding, they're offering aid and the rest. The amount of money that comes to Kenya from the Western nations in terms of aid is around 9-point-something trillion in a year, isn't it? If you talk about aid, humanitarian crisis and all those things. And then third, talk about for structural adjustment. Setting up pace, for example, you talk about the discussion about the wage bill, isn't it? That discussion is a discussion which is more of World Bank. Remember, World Bank, IMF has always talked about structural adjustment program. They began talking about these things during Moi. They talked about it during Kibaki. They're still talking about it in Uhuru's time. They talk about it during Ruto's time. So they have not seen a clear change of trajectory. It's just, for example, Simba, if your wife tells you, I will leave you today, then you go to work and come back and find her cooking for you lunch. Why should you bother fighting and saying, but you said you're leaving? Don't fight that way. You have lunch, take your wife, and continue with your life. Why do you tell her, why have you not left? Did you want her to leave? No. But she can make noise, I want to leave. No one is 100% happy in a relationship where they are.
Yes.
So even Kenya cannot claim, and William Ruto cannot claim that he's 100% happy in a relationship with the West. And therefore, I know very well that one reason is that they are analyzing William Ruto's decisions, especially fiscal decisions, foreign policies, and discovering they are so consistent with them, there is no need of fighting him. Then secondly, you have to understand how these Western nations operate. Western nations operate in a very interesting manner. They are just looking at, are you engaging them in a way that is respectful? Because it's not, you can disagree with your parents, isn't it? You can intellectually disagree. In fact, Ruto has this capacity to intellectually, violently disagree with somebody. But then, if you do that way, they understand why you are doing this. But you cannot just say, Western nations are crap, they are useless. If you say they are useless, you come here, you're putting on their suit. I'm dressed like a suit that is not African, isn't it? Then I'm standing on TV and saying, Western nations are useless. They will not don't believe me. They just know I'm a joker. And you see, all of us, the four of us, are dressed in a style which is not African. So if you say Western nations are useless, then it does not make sense to them. Remember, the counter suit he has used to land there shows that I believe in African dressing, isn't it? At the same time, when you open your mouth, you speak the Western language. You use English to insult Americans. Putin said that in Africa, our first investment, we are investing in training people using Western language, and that's why we cannot have healthcare. So Putin's ways of making things is totally different from how Ruto speaks. In fact, Putin will find it difficult for them to address the Western media in English. He doesn't mean he doesn't know English. He will go there and speak his own Russian language and allow translators to struggle with that language. He won't even focus on English. Remember, even all these things, that I will tell you, don't waste time on these things about choppers and the rest. Do you know Libyan president used to land in the US carrying his own oxygen? Now you are saying, oh, William Ruto has landed, the plane will cost 240 million shillings. Libyan president used to land in the US. He never slept in a US hotel. He carried his own tent. To put up his tent to stay as president is very expensive. And then his own oxygen. He used to believe that he cannot even breathe the oxygen of Americans. That shows clearly Pan-Africanism. I want to breathe oxygen of Africa in the US. Can you imagine how difficult that is? And he used to achieve it. So William Ruto, even in spite of those statements, they still believe very well. And let me ask you, if you look at the credibility of the argument of the president on the issue of Pan-Africanism, does it make sense? Yes. Do you know why? The global financial architecture, as currently governs the international monetary world, was formed before no single African country had independence. And that's how unfair it is. So then he's trying to champion what can be changed so that at least it helps Africa. That's an intellectual discussion. If your wife disagrees with intellectual discussion, you cannot tell a useless woman because she is engaging intellectually. If your employee, whether junior or senior, tells you, intellectually I believe that this global financial economic architecture was developed without Africa in mind. For example, look at WTO, how you do trade. Like one thing, if you like, let me just give an example so that people can get what I'm trying to say. If you want to order for goods in the US from Europe, you order the goods, they get delivered, you pay after 30 days, isn't it? Now, if an Indian was to order goods, or Asians was to order goods from the US or Western nations, they pay on delivery, isn't it? If an African was to order goods, you pay even before they leave the US. Now look at that kind of trade policy. How is anti-Africa? If William Ruto fights it and gets us to Asia, we are fine. The next president will get us to Europe. Can you imagine if you're ordering a car from abroad? We are not trusted that we have to pay even before the car leaves the yard for testing, is it not? If you do import cars in Kenya, for them, the car you order, you say, I want this car. They'll pick the car from the yard. They go and do all the testing and inspection. They put the car in the ship. The car comes up to your place, isn't it? Then after 30 days, you pay, if you're in Europe. If you're in Africa, no way. Even you are paying even half of it before the beginning inspection. And before the car leaves, when they're sending you all the records, bill of landing, you have paid everything because no one trusts an African that can pay. How will we ever be fair? Now look at you. You are paying your money 90 days before you receive your goods, isn't it? While Americans are paying their goods 30 days after they are enjoying the goods. Europeans 30 days after. So you look at cash flow challenges. That's why we have to borrow money also. So we are looking at economic architecture, just to give you one example, that does not work for us. Now, if you want to import anything to their country, the kind of certifications that you have to pay, ask all people who export things, avocados to the US, avocados to UK, even tomatoes, onions and the rest. That's why the trade negotiation that is going to take place in the US with the president, I will be very glad if the president puts his foot on the table and says, these terms are not good for us. And if he does that diplomatically, Americans are not annoyed. But when you see some opposition go to the media and insult Americans, you guys are useless, you can take us nowhere, then Americans don't take you seriously. But if you sit on a global stage and take the stage eloquently and intellectually, violently, engage these people, they respect you.
Pretty much. Here's the thing, Simba. I'm going to throw you up to where we are right now. Well, the point, well, we were asking if you are going to look at the president's state visit to the United States of America. The different ways to look at it. Can look at it in terms of the amount of money it's costing taxpayers to host him for 4 days in the United States of America. It's been put roughly at 241 million. That's close to 500 million. You could look at the benefits that Kenya stands to get from this particular visit. This morning, what you want to look at it from what perspective?
Thank you so much, Simba, for having me here. It's been a very long time.
It's been a long time.
I'm also very happy to see my brother, Prof. One thing you must appreciate is that in any engagement, there is a give and take.
Yes.
There is no gain without pain. Now, Kenyans, if we are to gain, we have to spend our money to finance the president's trip to the United States of America, with the hope that this trip will bring immense benefits to this country. And this will only depend on the strategies that the president will employ in this form of engagement. Look, this is it's a very important platform for the president after a very long time. In fact, during the Biden's presidency, it's only 6 heads of state who have been accorded such treatment.
Yes.
The state visit.
Yes.
Looking at Africa, for example, the last time we had that was in 2008 when the Ghanaian president was invited. Kenyan, it is now the third time after the 1980, the 2003, and right now the 2023.
Yes.
What we need to ask ourselves is to appreciate the history. In the past, when we had such visits, what did we experience? We can trace it back from 1980. There are so many economic policies that were brought in by that visit, and we saw the agriculture sector, education sector developing. As much as we can call out the former President Moi on so many ill activities that occurred during his tenure, but there are things that we give him credit for. Looking at 2003, when the president went, you saw the economic trajectory that Kenya took. We were able to see it, we were able to experience it, and it was also it was not only in Kenya but also in the region. We were able to see the region open for trade, and the aftermath of that visit saw a very successful tenure of the then President Kibaki. Now we have another chance after 15 years for Africa and after nearly 2 decades for Kenya. The question is, what are we going to achieve from this visit? Now, looking at it from that perspective, we must also now appreciate that U.S. has viewed Kenya as a very important partner, and they have relied on Kenya, especially on the security fronts. You have seen the military base in Lamu, and the U.S. troops and Kenya really fighting hard in the Somali, and you've seen the Kenyans' role in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And you have also seen the relationship that has been severed in Africa. And we can trace it also back in 2007, when there was that, the aftermath of the 2007 elections, the president, the former and the current president were treated to the ICC charges. Yes. And you saw the stand, the US stance, they really supported the US, the prosecution of the Africans, the two heads of, the former head of state and the current head of state then. And you saw, they even came out clearly to oppose their candidacy. And the then SecGen, they came up and the US gave its vocal point that they did not support this. And that forms the basis of the severed relationship between Kenya and the United States of America. Because after these two guys became successful in 2013, and they decided to move to Moscow, they decided to move to Beijing. And when they moved to Beijing, you saw it brought that economic rivalry that US now wishes to correct. You've seen so many, in the last 15 years, Beijing, actually China, has been the leading economic partner with Africa, and US has taken a back seat on the same. You've seen even in Niger right now, they have declared the 1,000 military military personnel from the US as an illegal thing, and the same is in Chad. So US wants I'm talking from the point of the United States. Yes. They were benefiting from Kenyans, because if not Kenya, which other country? Ethiopia, that they heavily relied on, currently is a civil strife area for nearly 2 years now. Uganda, for example, the autocracy cannot allow the United States to actually have the president go there, because of, you see, the championing of democracy, the rule of law, and the constitution. Looking at the Kenyan constitution is very robust. Looking at the media freedom in Kenya is fairly good. Looking at the civil society freedom in Kenya is fairly good. So US wants to use Kenya as their partner or as their agent to who Africa, the horn of Africa, and Africa as a whole. Now, looking at that, US will also have to take something. You've seen Kenyans are also going to Haiti, which is again on that military front, on that security front, which has also been objected to, not only by the Kenyans, but even by the people of Haiti. You've seen barbecue is braggadocio, and it says that if these guys come, we will turn them back as cargo. So US is looking at something from Kenyan perspective, from the Kenyans and from Africa as a whole. And so they are going to this negotiation not as losers. They're not going there as donors. There is something that they would want to achieve. There is something that they are targeting. And our question is that going to be to the best interest of this nation? Now, looking at it now from the point of Kenyans, how are we going to benefit? We are going to spend nearly 200 million to finance this trip. But we have seen there are so many things that are lined up. The trade, the bilateral talks, the investments, the trade between Kenya and the United States. You've seen there is aligned investors who are to meet the president, including the Delta Airlines, the Coca-Cola. And we are looking at this in terms of investment. You see, Ruto had been voted on an account of changing the economy. And the economy is doing badly because of the many foreign debts. It's because whenever Kenyans get to such fora, they always go there as beggars, not as equals, not as negotiators. They go there to receive from a disadvantaged point of view. So when you go from a disadvantaged point of view, you are likely to get help, but it will be conditional and with a lot of blackmails. If it is, for example, IMF loans, it will be on absurd interest. So we hope that all this that our president is going to engage in are going to be beneficial to us as a country, and they're not going to put us into unnecessary debts that will make Kenyans go deeper to actually finance these budgets and these debts. Currently, the high taxes and the policies that are being brought about by this regime are not doing as good, and it's because of such engagements that led Kenya to that kind of pitfall, among that kind of hole where they need to deal with such. So as I conclude, I would want us to look at it from this point. Ruto going to the United States of America at this time when the United States of America are actually gearing up for their elections, it's very strategic, and we can use the jealousy that is been evidently visible between the superpowers to have an advantage to negotiate certain bilateral certain investment activities that may be beneficial to Africa. Let's not just go there as beggars. If we go as beggars, if we go there without any strategy, we will just be adding to our debts.
Pretty much. Reverend, I want you to further expound on that point for Pan-Africanism. I mean, just like Prof introduced this particular conversation, when you look at the president, even his arrival itself, it signifies a lot. Ruto was dressed in a counter suit. I mean, in majority instances, he would have gone there in a complete suit, just like we are seated here on this particular set today. And every time that Ruto is in a counter suit on an international stage, is speaking the African language. That I've come here as an African leader. I am championing for Pan-Africanism. Let's talk about it then. In his latest one, it wants the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank reformed, which are heavily United States. And on there, that he also wants the composition of the UN body of the UN expanded to include more African leaders in it. How do you think? Do you think there's an agenda that the president is going to take to the United States president at a time when he's complaining about the debt levels in this country? In fact, even last week when he was at Harvard, I don't know, you guys saw that speech. He said, well, my problem is not taxation. My problem is that my country is burdened with so much debt, I have to tax to raise revenue to help that particular country. Do you think there's an agenda that this would be the right moment for him to go and carry, since all the questions that are being asked about Ruto administration is about taxation? And he's like, I'm not the problem. It is the amount of money, the amount of loans that are coming to this country, and the relevant debt.
Well, I think you brought so many points together, but looking at it, starting from the Pan-African aspect, yes. I think remember when Ruto first addressed the United Nations General Assembly in 2022, just a month or so after his election, one of the strongest points that he made was for the reform of the international financial system, and also he advocated for a strong African involvement in the affairs of the UN. And that story and that line of thought has been consistent every time. Even the last time round when he addressed the United Nations General Assembly, he still followed through that point, why the United Nations needs to be reformed. When the current structure was created, it was before, like Prof said, most African nations were even attained independence. So it was immediately after the World War. And so actually, basically like no African state was independent then. And until now, no much headway has been made in terms of reforms in that regard, as far as ensuring that Africa also has a strong presence and influence. And I think what the African presidents, besides President William Ruto, have been pushing for is having an African state as a permanent member with veto powers, just like the US, within the UN structure. And so it's a story that has been consistent. And yes, that, I think, to a large extent, at the back of their minds is meant to ensure that the interests of Africa as a continent are taken care of within the UN structure. And the president, as far as his projection of himself as a Pan-Africanist, is not, for me, just a political gimmick or move. Mm-hmm. I think it is a story that runs across the continent right now. When you listen to most African heads of states right now, yes, the point for a strong African unity, mm-hmm, is being pushed from many platforms across the continent.
So, my friend, I'm sorry to cut you short on that particular one. Yes, it might be a conversation the majority of African presidents now want to talk about. But if you look at the voting at the last UN Assembly, when the president made those remarks and said that we need to take this stance, none of them essentially supported him. When we're talking about the West leadership, yes, he made proper remarks. The speech received a standing ovation. But when it came to voting on those particular points, they never took that as a point that they wanted to look at. In fact, you would say 99% of the voting essentially said, no, whatever we're saying, we do not support.
I understand what you're saying. I agree with you. But as you know, old habits die hard.
Yes.
And those who hitherto have been beneficiaries of this skewed structure
yes.
Within the UN
yes.
will remain adamant, and they will still insist on holding that position. But you see, every time African leaders make a strong point for the need for reform,
yes.
there's always a ground that they are gaining in that regard. It might not be, the impact might not be immediate,
yes.
but eventually a time will come, because as many pick that trail of thought and make a point for it, and Africa begins to get its act right. Remember last week when President Yoweri Museveni was around, the point that he made for African unity, and one that he has consistently been running with for several years right now, until it sounds like a broken record. Many African heads of states are beginning to realize that unless we get our act right and unite, we will continue being taken advantage of. So, and remember last week when President William Ruto was in Kigali, attending the CEO Forum, African Forum, one of the things he made, one of the points he made was that there was still, when he goes to the US, he's still going to have a conversation about the change of the world financial infrastructure, and also he was also going to make a point for the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, which basically means he's not just going there to speak for Kenya and advance Kenya's interests, but he is also cognizant of the collective benefits that Africa stand to gain if that act is improved. Also, Kenya-US relations and Africa-US relations is also at the table as far as William Ruto. So William Ruto is not just going there from what he said. He's not just going there to speak for Kenya, but he's also going to speak for Africa, especially in regard to the African Growth and Opportunity Act.
Pretty much. Guess what? At a proper stage then, once we come back, Prof is going to weigh in on this particular one. I mean, you have problems with the UN composition, you have problems with IMF, you have problems with World Bank. Will this be a better stage then for you to present your views so they can start to be looked into? And then, can we come back here locally? I mean, the outlook of the president, and he is fighting a lot. I mean, you have to go back to the beginning of this year when there were demonstrations from the legal fraternity in the country who was saying that the president has become a dictator, when he said that whatever court's rulings were going to come on his biggest project implementation, most notably the housing agenda, he was not going to listen. That was going to go right ahead and continue implementing them. And maybe now, is it the best time for us to look into his turned down request to address the Senate? Could that be part of the reason as to why there was a diplomatic explanation that, well, it was because of scheduling as to why he could not be allowed to address the US Senate? Once we come back right here on The Morning Drift. My name is Elijah Charles Kiage, right here with this gentleman. Is a morning drive.
Assalamu alaikum. Siku ya leo tuko katika kaunti ya Kwale. Takriban watu 800 leo watapokea usaidizi wetu kwa hisani ya Lotto Foundation. Kwa hivyo ambatana na mimi siku ya leo tuone hali vipi.
Iko mbaya sana baba. Iko mbaya hali. Iko mbaya. Njaa tu.
Tunashukuru
kwa grupu ya Tuliani Kayamba.
Nashukuru kupata msaada kidogo, unaweza kunisaidia kidogo.
Waizidi na imani hiyo hiyo.
Asante sana kwa Loto, manake imebadilisha maisha, imetugusia maisha yetu, na leo tunalala watu tofauti.
Na wanekasheni, nashukuru na Mungu akubarikieni.
As long as we go with that theme that ukicheza kila mtu ni mshindi, we will also continue to support.
Kwanza na wafurahikia sana, nataka tena wakija wanikumbuke mimi mzee wao.
Thank you for your help. Together, we are changing lives.
Save a Life is a non-profit organization that has taken the front line in transforming lives in the entire country. So far, we have transformed life of over 100,000 people through our programs, which include medical support, youth empowerment, street family program, feeding program, and climate change. Join us today as we transform lives. As we always say, service to humanity is service to God. Save a life, transforming lives.
Are you a junior secondary school, a college, a TVET institution, or a university, and you want to advertise your intake? Book now and advertise with us today on both Lookuptv and all our digital platforms. Call us today. Or email us on sales@lookuptv.co.ke.
If you want to have a proper outlook of the economy, then you have to speak to the wheels and gears of the integral businesses in the country.
And I want to be able to make the youths and everybody coming up in Kenya know that this is here locally.
Men and women in the thick of the bust of markets rising and falling, fighting to make their business decisions stick.
I've always lived in my career that I can never be late.
You need to train by yourself. You need to practice by yourself. Then from there you can compose yourself and give kind of services like this.
On season 2 of the Captain's Arena, we seek the inside of the minds, predict the shift in the markets, get inspiration to start and make sense of it all.
Just watch what everybody else is doing and just make sure you're giving back to the society.
Oof. This is the Captain's Arena.
Kipindi ni ukulima ni mali na Manjoro. Kumbuka hapa ndipo unajifunza mambo mengi kuhusu ukulima. Kilimo ni uti wa mgongo wa nchi, na ukiwa na Njoro unajifunza. Kumbuka, angalia mwenyewe. Tunakuambia ukitaka kujua tips za ukulima, ungana na sisi kwenye Lookuptv. Every Sunday unatukuta pale saa 10, tunakuonesha kuhusu ukulima. Ukulima wa mimea, ukulima wa ng'ombe, ukulima wa kuku, ukulima wa mbuzi na yote ambayo yanahusiana na ukulima. Kumbuka nini? Kipindi ni ukulima ni mali.
All right, welcome back to the Morning Drift. Now, 2 issues that we're going to look into this particular hour. That yes, at one point we also have to look at what is going on in the country, and the biggest headline this morning, by the way, should you look at it, is that Gachagua allies now applying to oppose Ruto tax proposals just as a punishment to the president. But indeed, you don't joke with our kin. Or we're going to talk about that with the gentleman on the set this morning. But just before we get there, Prof, just before we went on break, we're looking at that particular issue for, well, Ruto as a Pan-African president now, and he is presenting himself as that. Do you think this will be the right moment for him? Yes, that indeed, as he goes in to try and bolster the Kenyan-US relations, that it could be the perfect opportunity to have his wish, especially on the reformation of IMF, on the reforming of the World Bank, increasing African presidents' participation in the UN Security Council, and also now, I want you to respond to that particular issue based on this, that indeed this particular visit has been seen as the United States of America wanting to cut the clout of China in Africa, especially Kenya.
Yes.
Now, since we know that, Prof, is it easier for the president to also say, yes and no? You want to cut the influence in my economy? Fine. I would also love this. That even as you give me all these goodies, I do accept. But the UN, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund that has been pushing economy restructuring plans in my country, it's got to stop a little.
Yeah.
Give me some leeway.
Oh, yeah.
Is it easy for the president?
Yeah, so first of all, let me try to, before that, there's something here I needed to correct because I didn't want to interrupt my fellow Wakili.
Yes.
When he said our cost to this trip is 240 million, that is only to hiring the jet. There are other costs, so it could be more than that. Because the guys are traveling to the US, they have to sit in an hotel, so there's more to that. There's more than 240 million. Maybe for me, it will be something around half a B.
What is the opportunity cost, Prof?
So I don't want to calculate a opportunity cost because, in fact, that's the question asking.
Okay.
So, first of all, he said, is it the right moment to visit the US now? I will tell you, before you get from your bedroom, because me, I have children, I have a house help, isn't it? And I have some of my cousins living with me. Before I get out of my bedroom, there's a way I must look. And before I get from my sitting room to outside to the parking, there's a way I must look. Is it the right time for Kenyans to go to the international stage? Not really, because of the fact that you are going before investors. You have managed the issue of you are going to meet General Motors, you are going to meet Delta Airlines, but they also have people sitting at home who knows what are your domestic issues. Like for us in our culture, when you go to look for a girl in a certain village, your aunt will tell you, I am married here, but these people are night runners. So, as the president lands in the US, there are American companies in Kenya. They are suffering the economic challenges that we have. Kenyans have low disposable income. Taxation is an issue, isn't it? Kenyans have issues of land, isn't it? Insecurity is an issue in the country. Kenyans are really complaining. So they ask us, say, you are in Kenya. Like that's the aunt now. What's happening there? Hey, there are night runners in Kenya here. So we were not well prepared to go there. You're in your country, your deputy president is on the front page saying that we are going to oppose your tax policy. And you are in the US discussing about the same tax issue. Are you really prepared to discuss about it? You go with your wife to the bank to borrow a loan. And the bank asks you, how stable is your marriage? But your wife has been beaten up. She looks very sick, isn't it? She looks very tired. The bank agent says, I can't give this couple a loan because they are fighting. I can't even see. So I'm trying to say, we were supposed to really prepare for that. So we need to prepare ourselves to reach this global space, because if we go to the global space with all those issues, now Haiti is an issue, isn't it? And I can tell you, it will be featuring in some of the headline. And this CNN, Sky News, BBC, they like sabotaging. You'll discover when news will start trending about African US Kenya trade, you'll see them bringing the issue of Haiti and how illegal it is and how Kenyans are practicing the legalities. And I'll give you an example. When President Barack Obama was in this country, you remember he was in the country, isn't it? What was the news that CNN, BBC, Sky News released?
Hotbed of terror.
That the President Obama has flown into the hotbed of terror. So you know, when all the international news agencies are focusing on Kenya, Kenya is in the US now, strategic partner, very key stakeholder. Then they flash negative news. The negative news sells more, then that spreads. How are we prepared to manage that? And another point is, I'm looking at the president's entourage. I'm looking at his cabinet secretaries. I'm looking and saying, who can sit in a US deal and get a deal for Kenya? Let me tell you, my brother, I work with Americans, I know them very well. When you go to negotiate every deal in America, or there is an international conference or some policy to be passed,
yes,
for one item, there are 7 most qualified people in that room. So for this trade deal, US-Kenya trade, do you know how many qualified people will be sitting in the room negotiating with these Kenyans, and these Kenyans are not even worth the salt of these people. That's why China gets the better of us. So you cannot go whereby a primary school, if I like, qualified person, is negotiating with a PhD in the same subject. So how equivalent of competence is William Ruto going there? I'm seeing him, the plane is okay. The counter suit is great. First lady is wonderful, isn't it? But after that, who sits there with economic nose, who can smell blood, isn't it? And go for the American blood. When American says we are giving you loan for 30 billion shillings, they say, wow, 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 wow. Have we looked at the conditions? Do you know which kind of loan do we need? Do we need conditional loans they're going to give us? So how prepared are we to go to the national stage, especially in terms of our domestic issues?
Yes.
Secondly, our competency,
yes,
to go there, but also the agenda in that place. Who has defined it? I can tell you without a doubt, Americans have defined the agenda, putting in front their national interest. But William Ruto must have gone for personal interest. He wants to look good, so you look good, but you look good, but far from good, because you are getting nothing from this deal. So according to me, how do you look good? Who is your team?
Yes.
The team that will make you win these wins we are talking about. Now we go back now to your question you're asking about. The president is Pan-African. He appears to look so. Is it the time to put his terms and conditions, isn't it? And let me go back again. Do you know the size of American economy in terms of GDP compared to Kenya? How significant is Americans' GDP that you can negotiate against? So if you look, can you tell me what is Africans' wild card? Kenya's wild card is only entry to the Middle East, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And now that you can play with, not saying, let us look for how you want to trade with us, because that is the wild card Africa, actually William Ruto should use very strongly in this deal to say, no, what's happening? You want our cooperation to the Middle East. You are asked to help you to keep Africa as a peace haven. You have your military base in Kenya, all these things, isn't it? I would like, but does he have the people with the right person? Then secondly, has he discovered and defined his foreign policy? Because Americans, why are you refusing? You say, I don't think it's good for us. No, that's not the answer. Answer is, according to our foreign policy, we don't do this. Have you heard these things when you are young boys brainwashing a movie that Americans don't negotiate with the terrorists? So you're watching a movie through and through. An American has been kidnapped by a terrorist. And Americans don't negotiate. They are brainwashing you to know that they don't negotiate terrorists. That's their foreign policy. You see it in movies, you see it in the schools, you see it everywhere. Which is our foreign policy? Do you know how we should deal with Americans? We just say these are trade partners, these are development partners, but loosely, should you deal with China? How should you deal with the West? How should we deal with Russia? Now the president of Iran has died. He was in this country. How do we deal with the issue of Israel and Palestinians? Is it clear, or we are just like, we tweet as we think? So for me, that is now I'm talking about the preparedness. And then the issue of African Pan-Africanism, there's something William Ruto has to get clearly. Before you can represent African Pan-Africanism, you must be accepted with your peers in Africa as a Pan-Africanist. You know, Kwame Nkrumah was seen by everybody, even by Jomo Kenyatta, by Julius Nyerere, by any head of state in Africa, as a true replica of Pan-Africanism. is William Ruto there? You come, you are a young head of state, under 2 years, and you want to tell African head of state how to deal with the West. The guy who has a policy how to deal with the West is Museveni. He was here. Do you know he has said? He has said that to hell with you. Now, do you know what's happening in Uganda? If these foreign people, let's say these Western people go to Uganda, and you start putting their doctors in workshops, in hotels, they tell you forget about it. Doctors should go to the hospital. So if you want to talk to them, go to the health facilities, because you are wasting our expertise time in hotels and they're not available to serve our people. Why? Because these things are funded, hotel here, hotel here. That guy has developed a foreign policy against the West. I may not agree with him fully, but what I'm trying to say in short, you can see it. And Museveni is the second oldest African head of state after Paul Biya of Cameroon. So according to me, we are trying to pretend we can champion African Pan-Africanism without respecting our elders. In Africa, we respect elders. So if a young person wants to know more than older people, already these guys feel very dissatisfied, because William Ruto looks Pan-Africanist in the Western eye, but in Africa, no leader in Africa takes him seriously as a true Pan-Africanist, because he has not even respected them and related very well with them. And I'm sure also this trip Raila was supposed to accompany him, because also Raila once became head of AU, and you can see that if you want to bring the picture of true Pan-Africanism, he was supposed to find a way on which to work. And lastly, why did he sign a trade deal between Kenya and the US alone, leaving out East Africa, leaving out AFTA, isn't it? EFTA, isn't it?
Yes.
And still saying he's an Africanist. Is he self-interested but trying to pretend that he's a true Pan-Africanist? So I have not seen the consistency in William Ruto to call him Pan-Africanist, but I can see consistency in him trying to pursue self-interest.
Pretty much. Simba, let's talk about it like this. It's another issue that we got to look at this particular moment. Is a president who's been accorded that state visit to the United States. It's going to be there for 4 days. There was a request that was made by the Kenyan government and by the Kenyan State House that indeed once the president arrives at the United States of America, they would have wished that President Dr. William Ruto addresses the US Senate. Well, there was a lot of uproar in the country, both sides supporting their views on it. But then quickly, the Senate responded. They said, well, due to scheduling, I don't think we have time for that. We would have wished that this continues because of the good relations between the two countries, but because of scheduling purposes, we don't have time for that. Well, critics or political analysts looked at it and they said, well, there's a reason as to that. That you don't have to go very far to find Dr. President William Ruto speaking against legal entities within a constitution of this country. Number one, they pointed out two areas where he spoke about the sword, that his sword is not to cut mboga. He also spoke about how he would not listen to the court system in the country if indeed they were going to continue turning down his projects. Case in point, the housing project. Are we reading too much into that? Are we reading too much into that? That must have been the reason as why they said, well, we can't do that.
I think we are reading too much. And my response will be very simple.
Yes.
You see, there is local politics in the United States of America, and that which is in Kenya. Normally, when there are such state visits, there are a lot of emails that are sent. But these emails are inconsequential, considering that there is an understanding that there are local politics here in the country, in Kenya or in any other country.
Simba, what about local politics that grab international headlines? Because when the Law Society in the country started demonstrating against the president, it grabbed international headlines.
And I would respond to that.
Yes.
The main reason why the Congress declined the address by the president could be mostly premised on their local politics. You see, the Speaker of the Congress, the Senate and the House of Commons is headed by the Republicans. And that the request was made by the Democrats. It could just be a point they are trying to raise out there considering that the elections are coming in November. But then one thing you must appreciate is that still the president warrants and merits that kind of treatment. He merits to actually address the Congress.
Yes.
It's not about his competence, it's not about his eloquence, it's not about the policies that are here. To me, my opinion is that mostly it is on the US domestic politics. But then look at how the United States, it's a tricameral. Of course, there is the judiciary, there is the legislature that is composed of that is the House of Commons and the Senate forming the Congress, and there is now the executive. Now, one thing about Americans' policies is that they stem from the people. They stem from the root, so that even a change in government cannot majorly affect policies that are created or that are entered into bilaterally, maybe between Kenya and the United States of America. So even if there is, and that was my greatest fear, that is the greatest fear of so many people, that having signed or having gone to the United States of America at such a time as this, when the elections are just nearing, maybe the discussions that may come out or may come from this kind of engagements or investment treaties may be dealt a blow. You see, many a times in Kenya, for example, when a new government comes in, it comes in with new policies. But when we get to the politics in the United States of America, the democracy that stems for around 400 years, it cannot be a ground to undo what agreements have been entered into. Now, looking at your question on the aspect of democracy, the respect of the rule of law, the respect of rule of law.
Yes.
As I said, Kenya is fairly trying as compared to the other African states. Look at the free media. As much as the president is out there to castigate the media, but they still have their freedom. Look at the free civil society. In fact, there is a pact, there is an implementation of a funding module that the president has actually promised. He promised, I think, on the 11th of May this year, that he will actually implement that. And if you see the state visit, it has been choreographed, and the planners have actually set and apart a time that the president will address the issues on democracy, civil societies, and rule of law at the Carter Center, which basically harbors and basically bases on issues of democracy. You remember it was formed by the 39th president of the United States of America together with his wife Rosalind. And at this point, the president will be able now to engage the civil societies through questions and answers. And one question that must be very clear, one key aspect that I feel the US should also leverage on, especially in such visit, is to talk out some of the pronouncements that the president have made, which have actually have inconsequential constitutional backing. Because if, for example, if you say that I'll use my sword, it is as much said than done, because when you go to court, and as Prof mentioned, if you have your legal issues and the facts backed with the law, basically the court will rule in your favor. It may take time for them to be implemented, but one thing, it will eventually come. That's why right now Okuro Court and the likes have actually gone to court to cite the president for contempt, because as per the constitution, no one is above the law. So there are local politics which will always be there. There will always be opposition. Anytime the president visits the United States of America, anytime the president goes international, there will always be opposition because of how we have been brought up as in Kenya. Kenya politics is based on tribal inclinations, where we mobilize each other ethnically, so that when we talk as a tribe, and we basically many a times do not base our politics on issues as in the United States of America. So with this, you expect so many emails, especially with the uproar right now. in the Mount Kenya, the uproar with the opposition, the uproar with the finance bill. And you see, some of these things are being actually supported by the United States of America, because IMF, for example, supports the increase in taxation. Because you see, for taxation and budget normally is determined by the global factors. For example, the IMF, the budget and the expenditure. And we also look at the policies of the president and the manifesto. So there are so many things which are there. So you cannot wish away such emails at such a time as this. But that is not the reason that made the president not...
The rest of you will follow. Is that a bit too hasty? Would have they said, well, hold on, let them change that leadership, then we go in at least for these deals to stand the test of time?
It depends on how you look at it.
Yes.
Because, you see, the U.S. is going through a transition. And for Joe Biden, because this is an election year, for the Democrats, there is a reason why they invited the president of Kenya. Remember, Ruto did not invite himself to the U.S.
Doesn't?
You know, and Ruto also does not have the luxury.
Prof is saying no. Prof.
Yeah, he invited. I have a letter sent to them. Yes. So
Ruto
yes,
Ruto
he requested to be invited.
Yes.
Ruto. Okay, I don't know about that, but what I know is that the president of another country cannot request another president to invite him for a state visit.
No. You can't say cannot. We have seen this before.
Yes.
I can even tell you.
Prof.
Yes. Simba, can you invite me for lunch in your place?
Prof, let me finish.
Yes, Reverend Claire.
Okay, you can ask me to invite you over for dinner, but it is at my discretion.
Yes.
You say so. The president of the United States of America was not in any way obliged to invite him, even if he had requested to.
Yes.
So for the president of the United States to choose to invite him in this season and at this time, there must be a reason. It's not just I like this guy. He requested. Let me invite him over for a state visit. And so for me, from where I sit as a Kenyan, if I were to look at it in terms of negotiations, Kenya stands a good chance for me because first of all, we have to appreciate that governments exist in perpetuity. So one president cannot come in and say, you signed this deal with the other nation and my policy is different, I'm canceling this deal. As long as signatures are appended to deals between Kenya and the US, even if an election is next week, and another president come in, that it does not invalidate that deal in any way. So Kenya is in a very strong position for me because Biden would like to strengthen Kenya's relationships, U.S. relationship with Kenya as part of maybe he can use it as a campaign tool. One, because Americans are very, very conscious of their strategic partnerships.
Yes.
Like Prof said,
yes.
The U.S. does not rule through colonizers, but through alliances. So the U.S. sees Kenyans, and the majority of Americans see Kenyans as a strategic partner in this region, especially as far as the U.S. War on terror is concerned, terrorism. Because remember, one of the terror cells that has been very active in the region, Al-Shabaab, is allied to ISIS. So the U.S. would rather have strategic partners within the region to engage those terror cells instead of allowing those terror cells to come to the U.S. So let's fight them from there, and we already have a strategic partner in that region to continue. So that one is very, very important. U.S. security is very, very important, considering that they have been victims of terror attacks, and the most significant one being the September 11th, you know. So for the American people who have ever tested terrorism, they know that Kenya being a strategic partner on the war on terror is very, very important. So for us, on the other side, we also have our agenda, you know. So there's that counterweight that we have while negotiating. It gives us an advantage. So for me, I see this timing, it's not bad. It's not bad. Any time you are invited for dinner, you can't say, you'd have invited me yesterday because yesterday I was eating sukuma wiki in my house. At least, today I had slaughtered a head and you've invited me, anytime someone shows you hospitality, anytime is good time. There's no bad time to be invited.
Prof, take 2 minutes on this. And Simba as well, I'll be coming to you on this particular question. Wrong timing. That there's going to be, there might be a change of guard in the United States of America. 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, first of all, you see, American as a superpower.
Yes.
One thing about government that we need to learn here at home is about stability. Stability here simply means a government might not be efficient, but must be stable. So the decision being made about government is all about stability. Whatever can bring in stability is never done.
Yes.
So I'm sure that if you look at some of the things which were negotiated by George Bush, the AGOA thing was not during Obama. It was before Obama. I remember that it's actually being now reviewed. Not being dismissed, but being reviewed. Meaning that Americans will keep their word. So what we can say is that if William Ruto is smart enough to get something the better of Biden for today, that will stay in prosperity. So let us not be worried about that. Secondly, Joe Biden, Trump, who has been a president more of pro-Africa.
Yes.
Without knowing it, Trump has been a very pro-African president in many ways, because it is during Trump that we saw so many, how much money was coming to Africa in terms of aid and in terms of development. Trump did a lot. When Trump says America comes first, he's saying the same thing as Joe Biden, but Trump has no ways of getting away with many things. When Trump said, I remember his public address when he said that any country will negotiate with American based on the American interest first. But that does not mean that you ignore. Remember, the same Trump worked with China. Trump has even went to Russia. Imagine if Trump could work with Russia.
North Korea.
South Korea. It shows you Trump is very open-minded because Trump is looking at the interests of America. So if Kenya can get the better of this by looking at what is the most important interest Kenya has in this discussion, Kenya actually can get a good deal out of it. Change or no change of administration, nothing happens. Remember that American constitution is such a way that the president is not so powerful. Look, if a head of state invites someone as a head of state, yet Congress says they cannot address them. In Kenya, William Ruto inviting Museveni to Kenya for a state visit. Can Parliament, can Moses Wetangula write and say we have a schedule issue? It can't happen because American says that different. Actually, this is a very important point.
Yes.
Kenya needs to learn from how independent institutions are in the US.
Yes.
The presidency is the executive.
Yes.
Legislature is legislature. And legislature cannot suck to the executive. In Kenya here, William Ruto could have made a decision that even judiciary could have agreed with, even the executive.
Yes.
Even the legislature. So here, it's fine that the legislature says, no, you cannot address us because of scheduling. But for me, if you, putting all cynicism aside, the main reason, the main feedback we are getting from Congress excuse that they don't have schedule is simple.
Yes.
That this is not a priority for them. It's a non-priority agenda. They don't see the value William Ruto's speech will make to the Congress, especially at this time. But at the same time, looking at what is critical because Americans are going for election in November, their agenda, what they're looking for is how more or less to prepare for this election than having all these speeches which are more from Africa. And also, if William Ruto wants to say anything that needs to go to the Congress, he does not have to tell the Congress. There are avenues even to address the Congress. He can address the Congress through other avenues, even through a letter. You can write a letter. You can send your ambassador. So this tells you that maybe this visit is a PR thing, but real business begins after this. And lastly, I call something 40-20-40 rule. Did Kenya spend 40% of the time preparing for this visit? Because if you spend 40% of your time preparing before the visit, you spend 20% of your time during the visit, and after the visit, are we preparing for the next visit, or we are preparing for how to execute the deals we got from the US so that we get the better of this value for money. So if we do that, I won't mind if it's $500 million. But if we just go to the US for PR, then come back again and go back to the same problems with no solutions, then I'm feeling our money has not been spent well.
Pretty much. Simba, take 2 minutes, please, just before we jump into local issues in the country. The timing with the change of guard that is coming, I would like to think that it would have been better.
As I have opined earlier, is that when we look at United States of America,
yes,
they have systematic and policy continuity. Because unlike Kenya, where policies are emanate from the executive and are pushed down to the people,
yes,
with the United States of America, policies emanate from the people.
Yes.
And that is why it is very hard to push or to do away or undo these policies. That's why when Obama came to power, most of us believed that he would be more pro-Africans. But he went ahead continuing with the US policies and also looking at this timing as well. Any agreement, any investment agreement that will be made between Kenya and the United States of America will surpass the politics of the United States of America. It will not matter who will be the president then. The timing is very perfect, and the timing is actually, like I said earlier, Ruto is very strategic. One thing you must also appreciate about our president is very strategic, is very brainy, is very, as compared to the other presidents, is very brainy. Number 3, Ruto is also one of the most educated presidents that we've ever had. And so we expect much from these talks. We expect much from these visits. My only worry is that when we convince the investors to come to Africa, we will be able to contain them. Because there are so many investors who are already here, but they are scared. Why are they scared? Because of the tax policies, because of the corruption that is concocted in so many laws. You see, for example, if you look at the Companies Act, for example, you cannot start an international company without local directors. And many a times these local directors are basically cronies of these politicians. It's just a way of minting money from these investors. So we as Kenyans should relook at the corruption, because corruption will hamper. We may get very good deals from this visit. We may get very good ties from these visits, but my worry is, will we be able to maintain and contain them in this wild economic times, in this wild tax regime, in this wild corrupt government? That is one thing that we should look at, not the politics of the United States of America.
Pretty much.
Number 2, in Kenya, for example, unlike the United States of America, I've just mentioned, we find that when a government comes in, they come in with new policies. Uhuru, for example, geared towards the Russia and China. You see, many of the projects that Uhuru began have now stalled. Many of the deals that Uhuru began have now stalled. Right now, Ruto is making his own new agreement. So if we could have that systematic and policy continuity, then as a country, we stand to benefit a lot.
Pretty much. All right, gentlemen, if you can, it's sort of tight what it is that we're talking about this morning, but let's then look at what's going on locally here, because that's where the drama is. The finance bill 2024 has come up with a lot of emotions in the country, but in an interesting twist. Every other Kenyan was asking about the whereabouts of Rigathi Gachagua, but he came up to say goodbye to the president when he was leaving to the United States of America, which was a good thing. But then his friends are speaking, because apparently there's a war brewing between the DP and the president, according to his friends. Because if you go by the words of the deputy president, he told us, how can you know? You're not privy to these matters, so shut up. It's time for us to deliver. And then he said, I'm a man of little words, as you have seen since I became the DP, so I'm going to shut up and continue to deliver to the people of Kenya. Doesn't stop there. Good. Let's watch this story then, because the AG, Nancy Gathungu, has criticized the proposed 2024-2025 budgets. highlighting gaps such as reducing the budget for proposed project by 500 million shillings in Nairobi and 300 million shillings in Mombasa counties. Stanley Lugaria with more. Once we come back, then we'll be looking at the standard so we see exactly what the friends of Gachagua are also saying about this particular document. Once we come back, let's take a look at this story.
The aggregated budget has been reduced by about 985 billion from the previous year's estimated expenditure of 4.4 billion in some sampled programs which have indicated in the table on flood mitigation and food security initiatives.
Auditor General Nancy Gathongo says the 2024-2025 budget is set to increase to 1.85 trillion shillings, up from 1.79 trillion shillings in supplementary budget to 2023-2024, further faulting the government under the proposed budget for failing to allocate for learners and learning institutions, including TVETs, as well as the government not utilizing the 7 billion shillings in contingence fund for the current emergencies, including floods.
You're asking for more personal emolument, and at the same time, you are saying that you do not have space. I look at a number of 150. Employ 150, that means you require more space. Do you have space for such?
As I previously presented to this committee, the ministries, departments and agencies are not using the contingencies fund for urgent and unforeseen needs as guided by Article 208 and Article 223 of the Constitution and Section 21 of the Public Finance Management Act 2012.
Gathongo says delays in the release of exchequer funding have resulted in delayed service delivery for the institution, calling on the Budget and Appropriations Committee chaired by Kiaru lawmaker Ndindi Nyoro to intervene as she faulted the proposed budget for inadequate resource allocation to key and crucial institutions in the country.
You allocated additional resources for that, or that is where you want to employ more, in which case, Chair, if the reduction on personal emolument would affect the implementation of the Office of the Auditor General on this particular program, then I think this reduction should be reinstated.
The auditor has requested the committee to ensure the reinstatement of the cut budget for the institution to enable it to execute its constitutional mandate, with the committee urging Gathongo to consider cutting expenditures by projecting to own a headquarters, which will save massively on the 180 million annual arrears on rent, while appearing before the Budget and Appropriations Committee for the proposed budget for the financial year 2024-2025 and the supplementary budget estimates to 2023-2024.
You can clarify about the costing, because that being the case, then if we have to measure the amount of money you are dispensing as rental expenditure, it will take 30 years for us to recover the investments of 6 billion, given your 180 million currently, which is expected.
The review of the 2024-2025 budget estimates indicates inadequate allocations for recovery programs like flood mitigation and food security, signaling potential issues with other competing priorities and underestimation of envisaged risks.
Stanley Lugaria, Lookuptv, Nairobi.
Sheila, if you can, let's introduce a twist to this particular story, because it's not only the Auditor General who's saying it's not a good document and we're going to stand against it. And somebody told me yesterday that as a Kenyan citizen, whatever office you hold, even if you're a member of parliament, now is the time for you to speak, because the period for your proposals essentially expires in 1 day. You're given 4 days. Good. All right, let's see what the friends of Gachagua are saying. Good. That's the headline on the Standard. They're saying we're going to oppose the tax proposals. Prof, let me actually read the exact thing so that we don't make a mistake on it and get corrected. They're saying, here it is, Gachagua allies to oppose Ruto tax proposals. And I'm going to read it for you, gentlemen. They're saying that the Mount Kenya Members of Parliament say that the first rebellious act against the president will be to amend the finance bill that the government intends to use to collect taxes that will fund its operations.
Wow.
Prof, I'm going to start from this one,
Yes.
and then we go to the AG. So we keep on asking, what's going on with the DP? Where is he? Why is he not speaking? Why is he missing state functions where essentially you find him seated to introduce the president? Well, until the Limuru 3, where there was a stern warning to President William Ruto from Kikuyu leaders, a section of Kikuyu leaders, told him, do not touch him. We know your plan, and we ask you to stop. Failure to which, that's the first one.
Yes.
Is that simmering division within the president and the DP?
I think that, first of all, it's unfortunate that I want to urge Kenyans to
Yes.
move away from to kind of politics and
Yes.
ways of making
by the way,
policy.
Prof, I've been informed we have 10 minutes, so I'm going to give you 3 minutes for this.
Yes. So we need to move away from the thing of Mtuwetu to really looking at William Ruto as a head of state of Kenya.
Yes.
Deputy Gachagua needs to also move in to become a Kenyan leader, because he's never been a Kenyan leader. He's talked about the issue of shareholders. For us in Central, we gave so much. We have to line up and receive our package first. I'm sure this is what will bring division in the country. And of course, you're asking about the implication of this possible rebellion between against William Ruto. I would have wished if they said, a section of Mount Kenya MPs want to disagree with tax policy because it cannot bring development, but not because they want to rebel the president for the sake of it, because that's the being opposition. Opposition are always allowed to be oppose anything for the sake of it. But inside the government, I would like them to give us justification apart from the fact that they are protecting Gachagua. Because you see, if we pass the first finance bill under William Ruto's presidency, because they wanted to make sure that Mount Kenya, Kenya Kwanza proves to Azimio they can beat them, then it's affecting them now, it's affecting everybody. When we now oppose the next finance bill based on the fact that we want to prove or show a point to the president,
yes,
those are not reasons to really justify opposing or supporting. I would really ask Mount Kenya to move away from that discussion and start discussing issues on that Finance Act that can support people. And I was also going to comment about the issue of the Auditor General, just their comment going there. I want to ask Kenyans, let us move away from budgeting by discussing about how much are we spending, how much are we collecting. But you see, to Wanjiku, to Nyauke, isn't it? To Onyango, or to Amina, their main concern is, how is this going to impact their cost of goods that they consume, like bread and the rest? When we start having this discussion,
yes,
then the budget becomes Mwananchi budget.
Yes.
Have you ever heard saying this is not a Mwananchi budget? This budget is not a Mwananchi budget. We want to move from where the budget becomes Mwananchi budget. How is it going to ensure that you have doctors in hospital? Teachers are striking. Junior secondary teachers are on strike. Is this budget taking them back to work? Doctors are on strike. And now we see the issue of interns are on strike. Laboratory technicians are on strike.
Yes.
So if they are not, if you have no laboratory technicians in hospital, doctors have no one to diagnose these people. They are coming managers of death, because if there are no nurses, there are no interns, there are no laboratory technicians, can doctors just by telling you, I think you have a headache, make you know, recover? So how can we ensure education system recovers? How can we ensure healthcare wakes up? How is this budget going to increase primary school, secondary school, university transition? How is it going to affect the TVET? How is this budget going to create jobs for young people? How is this budget going to assure the economic growth? You know, if we just discuss by saying, oh, emolument, what does emolument mean to Wanjiku? Does Wanjiku know what emolument means? Many people, if you ask them this year, what is emolument? They're discussing and spending time on emolument, should be removed, should be put. All this budget is not for Wananchi. Now, if you talk about public participation, how can Wanjiku participate if they don't know how much will the cost of fuel?
Yes.
How much will be the cost of unga? How much will the cost of cooking oil after this Finance Act? Because if you just discuss maybe numbers, billions, how many Wanjiku knows how many zeros are in a billion? Let's not make this budget become a elitist budget. It should become a Mwananchi budget. And my main concern is that we are politicians like Ndingi Nyoro. He's sitting there discussing an elitist thing because they're in the boardroom. When they go to wananchi, talk to them in the rally,
Yes.
they are telling them, unga itashuka, mafuta itashuka. Why don't you explain how you move from the finance bill 2024
Yes.
kuunga kushuka? What's the connection between there? When you're in charge, I heard this guy called Frankie Bet saying, we want to, the dawa ya kupunguza ulevi is increasing tax on alcohol, isn't it? No. Because if you increase, I saw this during 2003, 2007.
Yes.
If you increase taxation on beer, which is branded alcohol, people go to start drinking illicit brews, which is not just going to be still expensive, but at the same time dangerous to their life. Because if you cannot be able to give us a beer, because no one taxes changa, isn't it? No one taxes illicit brews. So I think that Kenya Kwanza need to understand the following, and let me conclude this. This is very important. They are dealing with the two problems. One problem is we are having high debt situation. Two, economy needs to be stimulated. To stimulate an economy, at the same time reduce debts, needs mutually exclusive strategies,
Yes.
but at the same time, sometimes contradictory. So in this way, to reduce debt, at the same time bring economic stimulation, first, you have to lower interest rates in the bank so that you can bring an economic activity. Secondly, you have to increase taxes a little bit. This is the only time I agree you have to increase taxes a little bit, but not the way they are doing it, but to an amount which is manageable. Thirdly, we need to take up some loan,
Yes.
like bonds, isn't it,
Yes.
to buy off our debt. At the same time, you have to lower your expenditure. You know, these things have to go together. And lastly, you have to come pro-business or pro-trade policies that allows trade activities to allow money circulate in the economy so that Manjai could feel. So if this budget cannot address the following, this is just a joke. And I've read this budget. It does not show us how interest rates will go down to allow business people to access credit. It does not allow people
Yes.
to lower expenditure because they're actually increasing expenditure. So if you increase taxes and increase government expenditure, you are actually killing the strategy that can help us recover from debt and stimulate economic development.
Pretty much. Reverend, on that one, the friends of Gachagua have spoken that maybe for the very first time around, you're going to see a political budget that either fails to go through or goes through based on the treatment of Rigathi Gachagua.
Well, it's not the first time. Over many years, we've had such situations.
Yes.
So when a group of people who have personal interests or sectarian interests see an opportunity to blackmail government into ceding ground,
yes,
and acceding, agreeing to their demands. So this is what I see, that they are threatening to not to pass the finance bill on the account of the deputy president. And as Prof has rightfully put it, the deputy president, Rigathi Gachagua, is not the deputy president of Mount Kenya region. And I think that is a fact that many leaders from the mountain are yet to really appreciate and understand. And I think they know it, but whether they really understand it or not. And not just that. And I think the responsibility and the burden lies more with the deputy president himself. There needs to be a departure in the way in which he articulates issues from that of being the voice of the mountain. So because as he speaks, and most of the time as he speaks and his close allies speak, because we all know in politics, even if you don't say something openly yourself, as long as the people who are perceived to be your closest allies, people whom you drink tea every day or you can't sleep without having a phone conversation, say something, in politics it's always perceived to be that is you speaking. So I think the deputy president must really begin to socialize his own thinking and to appreciate the fact that he is not the deputy president of the mountain.
Yes.
He is the deputy president of the Republic of Kenya.
That's it.
And depart from any attempt or being sucked into a conversation where he is speaking on behalf of the mountain.
That's it. Pretty much. Simba, 3 minutes.
Simba, I want to start by laying a very brief foundation on this finance bill of 2024.
Yes.
This finance bill, we must look at it against the 2023 Finance Act or bill that also introduced draft measures and increased new taxes. But still, we have not met our targets.
No, sir.
We are yet introducing newer taxes, which actually borders double taxation. For example, when you look at the motor vehicle, proposed motor vehicle tax, we already pay fuel levy. When you buy 1 liter of petrol, there is a lot that you are almost 60%. There is also the railway levy. There's so many things that we already are dealing with as a country, and we cannot see a result. So looking at this finance bill, we must look at it from the point of revenue expected and the expenditure. The expenditure, you see, when you collect taxes, when you want a citizen to appreciate that taxes, it must be seen that it works in their favor. But at this point, you are increasing taxes, and these taxes, we do not see any value for the said taxes. It's like we are raising taxes to finance individuals' lifestyles. For example, right now, there is nothing we have gotten right as a country. Even hosting a match here in the country, it can't happen. We are going to host a match in Lilongwe. Look at the feeding program. It has also been scrapped off. The JSS are out. The nurses are striking. You can look at it from all that point. There is clearly a mismatch.
Yes.
The taxes are not working for the people. And that is something that the government should look at strategically. The government should ensure that the citizens are pretty much appreciating the taxes they are paying. Number two, looking at now the blackmails by Gachagwa's allies. I would address it only in two statements. And yes. I've opined in this platform that the president already knows the projected outcomes or the projected allies in the year 2027. And I said the president is very busy looking at the Western region. Western, that is Nyanza. And I would repeat that in 2027, the Mount Kenya will not vote with the President William Ruto. The deputy president is likely to come from the Western region, either from Nyanza or from the Luya community. And Raila Amolo Odinga may not run as a president, but he will throw his weight behind William Ruto. Because number one, looking at it from this point, what does Mount Kenya people want? Because right now they are isolating themselves. And this is a card that William will play very well. In fact, to me, I believe they are playing to William Ruto's trap. William Ruto wants to play every other person against Mount Kenya. Because you are crying, and yet you have the deputy president. You have almost 4 ministers in charge of agriculture, in charge of water, in charge of finance, and so many PSS. You see, you are crying, yet you have the leader of, the leader of majority, the one who is in charge of budget. So, finance.
Yes.
My question is, what else do you want from the rest of the Kenyans? So it's very clear that everyone can see it, that there is a blackmail, and Mount Kenya are pushing themselves away from all the Kenyans with those selfish demands. Last but not least.
Yes, 45 seconds.
Rigathi Gachagua is following the same footsteps that Ruto already had gone through. Ruto was very strategic. He knew very well when there was problem, he ran to Kiambu. He did not run to Eldoret. He had the backing of the Kikuyus, the Mount Kenya then. Raila, when he had problems, he would run to Kibera. But right now, Rigathi Gachagua, going through the same challenges that Ruto had gone to, and he knew how to deal with it, has gone to Nyeri. And he has gone to Nyeri to mobilize. Actually, he has a hand, DP has a hand in the Limuru 3 conference. And that's why they did not really insult him. They actually were very cordial with him. They were inviting him to come together with the president. So this will only serve to alienate the Mount Kenya from the rest, and they will remain in the cold for the first time.
Pretty much.
Just 1 minute.
Guess what? We're getting killed. My director doesn't want us to continue. Prof, I'll invite you again for this conversation because it goes on, isn't it? All right. Take the gentleman that we had this morning back online at Lookuptv across all your social media platforms. It's been a lovely show this morning. You got to attest to that. The hashtag is the morning drift. My name is Samba. Elijah Charles Gage. See you next for another edition. Goodbye.